Hi, this is Mashnu, and here is an interesting endgame. Now the position on the board is not yet an endgame, this is a middle game position, but soon there will be some simplification, so we'll reach an interesting endgame. And I wanted to show it from this point because it's interesting to think about what grandmasters do with the question when to simplify towards an endgame and when not. In this case, oh, by the way, the game was played between Grandmasters Ulf Andersson with white against Robert Hübner playing black in 1981, and in those times both players were top Grandmasters, rated above 2600 both. So, well, let's have a look at the game. So the thoughts of white here, of course we must think that there is a threat. Queen takes f3 is the threat of black, trying to ruin the pawn structure of white. Now a way to prevent this, there are actually two main options. One is to play king to g2 to be able to retake with the king, and the other idea is to take on c6. The problem with king to g2 is that after queen takes f3, king takes f3, black has the possibility of solving his problem with this backward pawn by playing c5 now. So then this pawn is not longer a weakness on c7, it will be traded or perhaps advanced. So then black has at least equality, let's say equality here in this possible endgame. So this is not what white did. I'll return to the initial position. Here Ulf Andersson decided to trade the queens. The idea behind this queen trade, let me show you, queen takes c6 check, rook takes c6, is that now the rook is blocking his own pawn on c7. So we are able to later reach an endgame with this weakness on c7. That is a potential problem for black. White also planned here to play the move bishop to g5. The idea of bishop to g5 is to trade this bishop for the knight, and after black retakes, then support d4 that is attacked with e3, and then perhaps continue with rook to c1 first, and then knight to e4 attacking the bishop. And this knight on e4 is very strong actually. It also can be, perhaps in some variations, be used on c5. Here black decided to play knight to d5, and a big trade followed. Knight takes d5, e takes d5, bishop takes e7, and king takes e7, and we have reached this rook endgame with the weakness on c7. White continued with rook f to c1, and here, well, black is almost forced to take on c1. He could of course also play king to d6, but we reach then as a very similar position as in the game. Let me show you. If king to d6, then we trade on c6, and then we give a check on c1, and the king can go to d6 back, and this position was also reached in the game but in a different move order. Let me show you. The game continued with rook takes c1, rook takes c1, king to d6, same position. And here white must make a new plan, a new short-term plan. How can we improve the position here? It's not easy to attack this c7 pawn and to win it, of course, because it can be easily defended by black. So we must think, how can we improve the position of white? One plan is to play f3 followed by e4, and this is a way of trying to force a breakthrough in the center. And we also could think about how can we improve the position of the king. For example, it could be an idea to try to bring this king to d3, where it supports the e4 advance. And in the game white played f3. Still the pawn structure is flexible of white, so he can play e4 whenever he wants. He's not forced to do it right now, he can wait a bit. Black continued with c6, and white played king to f2. So bringing the king in a more active position before advancing this e-pawn. Now rook to e8 was played by black, so black is preventing this white's plan of playing e4. And to prevent that black plays the move f5 that would control even more the e4 square, white plays a very beautiful move here. He plays the move g4. So with g4 we prevent f5, so we can continue with the plan of trying to advance the pawn to e4. Now advancing this pawn to e4 is not easy. We need either to place a rook on e1 to advance it later, but if we place a rook on e1 then c5 can be played, and then black is solving this backward pawn. So the plan of white here is to play e3, king to e2, king to d3, and then e4. You see, in the endgame we need to make this type of short-term plans with the idea, how can I improve my position even more, just a little bit more and more, because it's almost impossible to calculate a winning variation in this type of positions. It's just too far away to calculate. Black to move here, he played a5, so he's trying to gain some space on the queen side, and also he wants to prevent, I'll just go back one move, imagine here white being to move, it would be a good idea to play b4 here with white to control c5 and a5 even more, so the whole queen side would be fixed and then we can concentrate on this center breakthrough. So black plays a5 to control b4 and gain some space. White continues now gaining a bit space on the king side by playing h4 first. Black moves g6, and now rook to c2, h6, and perhaps you're thinking now, what is white doing? Why is he playing this rook to c2 moves, and when will he decide to play e3 and the idea of king to d3? Well, the thing is that black doesn't have any active way of improving his position, so white is simply preparing the action even more. The idea of rook to c2 is to defend the pawn on e2. So white now can play with two different plans actually. One is the one mentioned, to play e3, e4, and the other one now is to see if he can improve the position of the king towards f4. That's also an interesting idea. Now the e2 pawn is defended. So here he played king to g3, and black made a mistake here by actually being worried about this king going to f4. He played the move g5, and after g5 white can play h5, and now we have created a new weakness on h6 this time. So we can see that black's pawns are becoming quite vulnerable. Slowly white improves his position a little more, and let's see how the game continued. f6 played by black here, and now white doesn't have anything to look for here on f4, so he returns to the other plan. He moves king to f2, king to c7, e3, king to b6, king to e2, rook to c8, wanted to advance c5. So before we play king to d3 here with white, we must stop black's counter attack. So rook to c5, excellent move, blocking the c pawn. The black rook returns to the e file, and now king goes to e3, to d3. If we look at this position again, we can see that white is making progress slowly. He has one advantage, space advantage here on the king side. There are two weaknesses on f6 and h6, and white is preparing the breakthrough with e4. Now this breakthrough is very important, because if black takes on e4, then we retake, and then the rook can start attacking the f6 pawn. And if it doesn't take, if it doesn't take on e4, we can again prepare the advance of this pawn even further, for example, or eventually to take on d5. So white has a clear plan here to use this breakthrough to improve his position. Black, on the other hand, doesn't have any way of actively attack white's pawns. Black played here rook to e7, and now finally the breakthrough was played e4. Now rook to d7 was played, and here white again with much patience. He didn't advance immediately e5 or take on d5. He played first the move a3, preparing to support the rook even more with b4. So actually having the confidence that this position is better and will stay better for white, so he can make these slow preparations. Black played rook to d8, and now white played rook to c1. Here comes a part in the game that is less interesting. Is white repeats a few moves because he's on move 35 here, and the time control is on move 40. So white wants to reach the time control as soon as possible, so then the players get extra time, and then he starts his plan again. So here a few moves repetition happen. Rook to c1, rook to c7, rook to c5. This is move 40. So after rook to d8, then white continues the plan of playing b4. A takes b4, a takes b4. Something new here in the position, the open a file. So it's important to understand that now black cannot go with the rook to the a file, because then we take simply on d5. So black waits a move by playing rook to d7, e takes d5 is played, rook takes d5, and now king to e4. White is winning more space, threatening to take now the rook, win a pawn. So if black takes this rook here, then simply d takes c5 check, and then the king captures these pawns and white wins. So black played here rook to d8. And now how to continue this, how to win this position? d5, continuing the advance of the pawn, threatening to take on c6. Black gave a check on e8, and the king goes to f5. This is a part of the game that must be very well calculated, because the rook of black is going to go to e3 and then capture on f3 perhaps. The game continued with c takes d5 first, because white was threatening to take on c6, and after rook takes d5, rook to e3. Now white has calculated that his king is going to reach this pawn, and the position will be won. So this is how the game continued. King takes f6, rook takes f3 check, then king to g7, rook f4, wanting to capture g4 or b4, but after this check the king goes to c7, and now rook takes h6. In fact, the game is over now, because it's impossible for black to stop this pawn that is very well supported by the king. So after this the rook will move away, and then this pawn will start advancing, and in 3 moves it will queen. There is no time for black to advance his own pawns. Now let's do a short summarize of this example. We started here when white, with the idea of the weakness of the backward pawn on c7, decided to trade the queens. The rook on c6 is misplaced, so white activates his bishop, makes the c1 square available for one of the rooks, and after knight to d5 there is a big simplification, and we reach this endgame when white continues trading pieces and now gaining control over the c file, attacking this weakness on c7, and that's the big problem for black. He needs to defend it, and then white very calmly starts improving his position with this f3 idea. c6, king f2, rook to e8, and now preventing counterplay, prophylaxis, preventing f5, and after a5, h4 gaining more space, g6 is played, king goes rook to c2 with the idea of threatening to go with the king to f4. This is something that black wants to prevent, but this g5 move is actually has a very big counterpart, and that is the weakness of the h6 pawn. After f6, white returns to his initial plan of going with the king to d3 and then trying a breakthrough with e4. Important moment, by the way, was this, that black wants to play c5, again prophylaxis, preventing counterplay, and then king to d3. And after this the breakthrough happens, and white makes use of the idea of, well, first this reaching the 40th move, and then the idea that the weakness on f6 and on h6 are going to become fatal for black. And that's what happens in the game with this continuation. So I hope you found this interesting in the sense of understanding how to make these short-term plans of how to improve just a little bit more the position, and also how patient we need to be in the endgame. On the other hand, also working with prophylaxis, preventing counterplay, and at the same time having our own plan to how to improve our pieces, how to improve the position even more and more towards a winning position. Alright, thank you for watching this time. I hope you found this instructive, and I'll see you next time on YouTube. Goodbye.